Hi, good evening everybody, and welcome to the daily Rambam Shiur number 81, 3 chapters per day. Our current chapters are 10, 11, and 12 of Hilchos Gerushin. There is a story once about one mashpia, a master in a yeshiva. He called his students and he says, "I'm very shocked and very disappointed about what people are speaking and talking about you." And then the student turns to the rabbi and he tells him, "But it's not true." He looks at him and he says, "And you expected it also to be true? It's enough. It's bad enough. It's terrible enough that there is even such rumors about you." I remember this story today when the Rambam summarizes the general glossary that were used throughout the entire halachos rules of divorce. Sometimes I will refer to a problematic get as bottle, it is annulled. Sometimes I will use the term posul, and sometimes I will use the term sofek, doubtful whether she is indeed a divorce or not. So he explains, everywhere throughout the entire halachos of Gerushin where the term bottle were used, which means it is void and it is even cancelled biblically. It's not a get. And therefore, she is not divorced, and for that reason, in case she went ahead and got married with someone else and they had children, given the fact that she is not divorced from her first husband, so the current marriage is not really a marriage, it's an illegit relationship, and for that reason, the child that will be born will be a mamzel, and therefore he is not allowed to marry bekohol in the Jewish community. Nevertheless, the ruling is the following. A lady heard that her husband died, and the ruling is when there is even one witness who testifies that her husband died, even though the actual exposure was not a typical level of exposure to the death that I will demand in other scenarios. Nevertheless, as we will learn later, when it comes to takonas agunois, the rabbis were concerned that Jewish ladies should not remain widows for their life, for the rest of their life. So therefore, there is more leniencies as far as to accept testimony about the death of the person in order to permit his widow to marry, start a new life. So the lady heard from a witness that her husband died, and she married with another husband, and they had a child. And suddenly one day, her previous husband, that she was under the presumption, and rightfully so, that he's dead, he appears. Turns out that her marriage with the new husband is totally illegit. So first of all, she cannot go live with her previous husband because she was already have damaged the continuation of the relationship by having relationship with this husband. She needs to get a divorce from her real husband, from the previous one, but she also got to have a divorce from the other person. So the divorce that she gets from her first husband is a real divorce, but the divorce that she is getting from her second husband, since it was not really a marriage, so why would a divorce be needed? So the entire reason why a divorce was instituted is just in order to prevent possibility of people who are not aware of the situation, that they will say, hey, Eishes ish yoitzo beloi get, is it possible for a married woman to live her relationship without a proper divorce? So for consideration what the crowd will say, they have instituted a so-called divorce in order to satisfy the talk of the town. Just for that reason this story came up. There is one good news for Kohanim. Everywhere that it's said in the case throughout the book that the get is not a get, even biblically. So in a case that the husband was indeed a Kohen, typically a Kohen is forbidden to marry a divorcee, including his own divorcee. After a Kohen have divorced his wife, he's not allowed to marry. But if it turns out that the get is not a get biblically, so there is no problem for the Kohen to continue to live with his wife. But there is one exception. There is one type of a get that, though it is not a get, nevertheless by a Kohen he still won't be able to live with his wife. Which reminds me another story in order to make my point clear. Once upon a time, a fundraiser for a yeshiva institution approached one of the famous donors for a project. He introduced him to the project, and he hears the entire presentation, and by the end he reacts, no, not today. Not today. He says, what happened? What happened today? He says, you see, today your shoes are brown. He says, what has to do my brown shoes with the project that I'm producing? He says, you're right. It has nothing to do. But to use it as an excuse for not giving, it's a perfect excuse. So I remembered this story, given the fact that there is one type of a get, that the get is not a get, but nevertheless, since the Kohen was the one who gave this get to his wife, he won't be able to come back to her. What type of a get? We have learned if a person writes on the get that this particular document gives you permission to marry anybody besides Shmerel. With Shmerel, you're not allowed to marry forever. Such a get is not a get because it is not separating totally, doesn't create a full separation between him and her. And for that reason, it's not a get. Nevertheless, for the Kohen, such a get will be a get. Why? Because in the Torah, in the written Torah, in the Chumash, it says in Parshas Emoil, the particular portion that speaks about all the restrictions and prohibition that the Kohanim must obey, it says over there the following words: Ve'isho grusho me'isho lo yukochu. Lo yikochu. A woman that was divorced from her husband, they should not marry. Given in the fact that the Torah there is not one drop of ink will be written extra. Since it is written over there Ve'isho Gerusho, if a woman that divorced, they should not get married with. So why the Torah needs to specify a woman that is divorced from her husband? Who is she divorced if not from her husband? So the Torah comes to teach us a halacha that even the way that divorce was presented, that the only one that she is divorcing her is only her husband, which means she's separate, but yet she still has she's not permitted to marry with everybody, because there is still some people that she is restricted to marry, and this is not a typical get, and therefore the get is not a get. But in order to forbidden her to continue to have the relationship with the Kohen, it's a sufficient type of a get for her not to continue to live with her husband. This is one type of exception that the Torah introduces in a get that is bottle, and it's called in the halachic term as reyach haget. The halachic term to it is the smell of a get, because it's not a proper get, it's only a smell of a get. But when it comes to kehuno, it is a sufficient get for not to continue to live with her. There is also a very interesting saying that when I've learned the halachos, I thought it will be a good introduction. We know Chazal are saying there is no happiness when doubts are being clarified, which means the greatest happiness a person can have when he is not living in a state of uncertainty. It reminds me a story that once upon a time a person said, every lottery ticket I buy, I never open up to see whether I won or not. And they ask you, why I'm crazy? I mean, what's the purpose to buy? He says, I rather live with a doubt that I may be rich than a certainty that I'm poor. This is one type of a model. But then there is the way the Torah tells us that the biggest or the worst certainty is better than the uncertainty. Any type of uncertainty, therefore there is no happiness. So obviously to live in an uncertainty, it is a big problem. And we see a perfect reflection of this principle in this concept in a context of Hilchos Gerushin. The Rambam defines the everywhere that it says in this book, in the halachos, that a woman will be sofek megureshes, which means it's not clear whether the divorce took place or was not divorce. In such a case, she won't be able to marry anybody else, but she may not also continue to live with her husband. Let's say a woman who went ahead after the get that she received was in doubt. She went and married another person and had a child. And this child, his definition, his halachic definition, is a sofek mamzer. He's doubtful if her previous divorce was a real divorce, so then he may be a kosher child. If the previous divorce was not a divorce, so therefore he may be a mamzer. A sofek mamzer, he cannot marry not a mamzer like himself, and he cannot marry any regular person. He cannot marry a mamzer like himself, because maybe indeed the person was take a kosher one. On the other hand, he cannot also marry not a mamzer, because he may be the mamzer one. So for that reason, we see a very clear scenario where in a case of a doubt, the outcome is way worse from the most terrible certainty. Then there is a third term that the Rambam is using in Hilchos Gerushin, which is called get posul. The term posul means disqualified. Doesn't say void, it says it's not fully qualified get. This is a reference to where biblically the get is fine. However, rabbinically, she is not allowed to marry. In case she went ahead and married and had a child, the child will be a kosher child. All she gotta do is again to receive the get, and everything will be fine. There is quite a discussion in the first chapter of the Rambam, of today's Rambam, that some scenarios where there is a legal ground for divorce, for example, terrible rumors about the lady, or certain uncurable disease. The rule is that when a person divorces such a woman, he must clarify and declare that he will never be able to remarry her again, even if she did not marry somebody else. If she married somebody else, so it's always forbidden to remarry her again. But even in a case that she's still single, he's still not allowed to marry such a woman again. For what reason? Sometimes people going through phases in their life, and later they going through a transformation, whether in their character trait, their behavior, and in their health, physical condition. So can be a scenario where a person was under, and rightfully so, under the impression that his wife, she really stepped out of line when it comes to the boundaries of modesty. And later, she improved her ways. He may then doubt or sort of regret his step he took to give her the get, which may cause a big dent on the validity of the get retroactively. So for that reason, that any future doubt should not be existing, so in specific scenarios where the ground of divorce is again a foggy ground, terrible rumors, or a temporary disease, any situation that can reverse itself, in those type of divorces, a person must declare and make it clear that this is a final decision and there is no way of return after it. One of the hottest topic that the Rambam introduces, and this became a source of lots of discussion, lots of books, and lots of material is written about the upcoming topic. And this is a case where after the divorce, people, witnesses, saw that they are in a state of yichud. Yichud, that which means they are in the same room alone, nobody is with them, for a while. And this is a suspicion that, given the fact that they were alone, very possible, and the assumption, if they are alone, most likely they had intimate relationship. Given the fact that there is a chazoko, there is a presumption. If a person can do something without any involvement with an avero, with a crime, the same thing, he can do it in a criminal way and he can do it in a legal way. So the presumption that a person will select the legal way rather to go through the criminal path. In Loshen Kodesh, in the language, chazoko, the presumption, ein odom oise beilosoi beilaznus, a person will not going to do the intimate act as an act of znus when he is able to do it as a process of a mitzvah. For that reason, the Rambam, based on the halacha, some people expanding the concept even further, if such a case occurred, a get will be demanded from him in order to let her marry someone else. There is another general prohibition about a person should never live with a lady where while he is living, he's still with the intention to divorce her. This is something should not be done, and this is forbidden to live with anybody that he has plans and intention to divorce her. There is also a major distinction what can be served the ground for a divorce of a lady. While in the Talmud there is an argument between different Talmudical authorities, some are very strict and the only way that a person will allow to divorce a wife if motzobo elvas dovo is something disgusting and unmodest he found on her. Some people will say only if she have damaged his food, and some people will say that even if he just found somebody who he likes her more. So the Rambam makes the following distinction. The first marriage, the only way to break up this marriage is only elvas dovo, something which is elvas dovo, something that is immodest, something that is not right, something disgusting. Second marriage, even if a person just cannot stand her, it's already a ground for a divorce. That's the conclusion that the Rambam makes, or reconciliation between the different opinions. Everybody heard amongst us the term Refuseniks. Refuseniks is those Jews who applied once, twice, and were refused by the authorities in Russia to emigrate to the free world. And today we're going to learn in the second chapter of today's Rambam about the different types of refuseniks. Same way as a conventional way to break a marriage is via a get, but unconventional marriage, the way to break it is via the refusal of the girl. And I say purposely girl and not lady, because we're talking over here about a marriage of a minor. A girl, a minor, that whether her father is not around or she was already divorced from her previous marriage that was done by her father, so after a divorce, or becoming a widow from a previous marriage that was arranged by her father, at that point she is free to be independently get married. Nevertheless, such a marriage is hanging on a thread. Why am I saying hanging on a thread? Because in order to break this marriage, all what need to be done is just a refusal. A refusal can be done verbally, or it can be done by action. What type of action requires? If she runs and lives with another husband, so her act are speaking volumes, about her refusal. The age that such a marriage breaker is legit and acceptable is, first of all, below the age of adulthood, which is typically 12 years, starting from 10 and on. Between the age and 6 and 10, I will make the forensic investigation if she has sufficient intelligence to make distinctions between serious items. So then I will give her to go ahead. Below the age of 6, even if she is intelligent, I will disregard any type of such a marriage. The good or the benefits from such a marriage breaker is very beneficial, since the person can get some benefits from such a marriage breaker. If a person was married to a girl and instead to go ahead with a typical get, she goes with a refusal, with a mi'un. Mi'un is the term refusal. Then she goes ahead and marries someone else, and she divorced this someone else. She's allowed, contrary to a typical divorce, which is a typical marriage breaker, that she, at that time she would not be allowed to go to her original husband. But since the original husband broke the marriage via refusal, so for that purpose it's considered he did not divorce her, and for that reason she can go back to him, back to her husband, because it says in the Torah, a person is not allowed to remarry his wife after she went ahead and married another person if he divorced her, but not if he received a refusal from her. A refusal has a totally different definition. So for that reason, there is another implication. Let's say the person who was married to such a minor happened to be a Kohen. So a Kohen is not allowed to remarry a divorcee. But this case, though it was a marriage breaker, but it was not via a divorce. Since it was not via a divorce, it's a perfectly acceptable way to remarry her back. So there is, though, that when a typical refusal is taking place, so record keeping will take, in the sense, those people who are around will take a record and write it down, but nevertheless, there is no documents that needs to be handed to her or from her, because only a get, a typical divorce. But this is a very unusual type of divorce that is being maintained to marriage of a lady, a girl, when she's minor. There is another important issue that is being dealt in the second chapter of the Rambam, about the importance to wait 90 days between termination of one relationship to another relationship. Whether the previous relationship was terminated by death or by divorce, nevertheless, a 90 days period must take place in order to clarify to who the child belongs, whether it belongs to the previous husband in case that she's pregnant, or to the first one. The implications are many implications in the context of marriage or prohibition of marriage, but then there is also implication about inheritance. When relations are determining the rights of inheriting, it is very important to make clarification whether they are related or not. So there is also another important prohibition where a person should not marry a woman that she is already pregnant. He needs to wait until she's going to give birth, although it is clear to who the child belongs, but the suspicion that given the fact that it's not his child, he's not going to be careful enough with the fetus. And then there is another prohibition. If a lady, she's still breastfeeding her child, a 24-month must be taking place of waiting until the new marriage will take effect. In the third chapter, I'm giving an introduction, which today when I was learning it, I thought always I like a good story. So I remember once upon a time, one of the very rare occasion that some rabbi passed by the Rebbe in Dollars, and he started to criticize Chabad, Lubavitch for different things, and the Rebbe, in a very unusual manner, he mildly say gave him over the head. And it was clearly that his intention of himself or those people who he represent was not coming from sincere places, but amongst all the words that the Rebbe said was relating indeed to a statement that today's topic in the third chapter is based upon. There are many halachic definitions of chazoko, and chazoko in our case is presumption. Presumption is certain axioms, principles that I'm taking them as a given. For example, there is a presumption that any person would not lie in anything that very likely will be discovered. So the Rebbe says, we see that people are lying, even things that most likely will be discovered in us saying the truth. And the answer is, it says, inshe, like people. When I say people, it means people that can be defined as mensch, human beings. They are not necessarily anybody who walks with two legs and appears to be a human being. He may configuratively appear as a human being, physically appear as a human being, but configuratively, not necessarily he is a human being. So I'm remembered this story when the third chapter deals with different grounds to assign credit, not credit in the financial credit, but credibility to a statement of a lady or a witnesses, or when there is two clashing presumptions that are being clashed with each other. When a lady comes, and I know, and everybody presumed that this lady was already married, so therefore she is considered to be what is called a eishes ish. She has already a known status that she is a eishes ish, she is a married woman. And I know it. And she comes one day and she declares, I am divorced. So the question over here, do I trust her or don't? And the answer here, I don't trust her. Because in order to break a pre-existing status, the only way to break it is or by witnesses or by a very strong chazoko. Chazoko is, I said, presumption. A legally well-established chazoko can break a current status. So for that reason, as I said, a woman who has a status of Aishes Ish, and she comes and declares, I am divorced, she is not going to be reliable. However, if the entire status of her being Aishes Ish is based on her own words, which means I don't know a lady from Adam, and she comes and appears in front of us, and she tells me, Aishes Ish Ani, I am a married woman, however, I have got the divorced recently. Then she will be trusted. And this is the principle that is called Hape she'osar hu hape shehitir. If someone creates a status that is entire basis, foundation of the status, he is the only source of the creation of the status, he will be a perfect source to break the status. Which means, since she is the one who introduced me to the fact that Aishes Ishani, she will be reliable also to declare, and she will be believed if she says, Ugurusho ani. Where do I know this principle? It says in the Torah, in the connection where a person comes to Beit Din, and he tells that here the new husband came and spread terrible rumors about his daughter. So the Torah tells, and the father comes to Beit Din, and he tells, Esbiti nosati lo ish hazeh. The Torah tells, my daughter I gave. When a person says, I gave my daughter, at this point, the daughter is taken, and therefore she will be restricted to the entire world. It's called Hape she'osar. He have restricted her when he just produced from his mouth the word Esbiti nosati, I gave away my daughter. At the moment that he continues his sentence and he says, I gave my daughter to this man, so the first part of the sentence restricts her, creates a restrictive status. The second part of Lo Ish Hazeh creates a releasing status. So as long as the same source of restricting, this is the same source of untying the restriction, she will be reliable. Yeah. This is a very important principles that in not necessarily, by the way, in the narrow scope of Gittin, they are useful, but indeed those principles are applicable to financial issues as well. You remember we spoke when we have covered the idea of migu. Remember we spoke quite a few weeks ago that many times when an individual is stating a statement, so many signals of credibility will be at the moment that he is the only source of information. So I'm transferring and I am assigning him what we call circumstantial credibility. So part of this credibility that is being assigned, one of the tools of credibility, it's called the mechanism of Hape she'osar hu hape shehitir. Then there is another type of reliability that will be assigned to a lady. And this is surprisingly, it's based on another principle. The principle is that Chazoko ein isho ma'ezes poneo bifnei bailo. The presumption is that a lady is not going to have audacity, chutzpah, in front of her husband. If she does have, most likely that she's saying the truth. So for that reason, if There is an argument. The husband tells his wife, I did not divorce you. The wife screams back, you have divorced me. Given the fact that typically a lady is not displaying audacity in front of her husband, I will assign credibility to her. But sometimes the credibility will be taken. For example, there are two sets of witnesses. One set of witnesses are saying the husband divorced the lady. The other set of witnesses, they say the husband did not divorce the lady. The husband says, I did not divorce. She says, you have divorced. Though that typically I would say a lady is not displaying audacity in front of her husband, but in a case that she has somewhat of support, she will be having sufficient audacity against her husband, and then her level of credibility will be diminished. Although mathematically should be reliable, but nevertheless the circumstances are preventing.
Just a question about what you said about when a man says, I give away my daughter.
Correct.
So let's say he gives her away to this man.
Mm-hmm.
God forbid, if something happens with that marriage with that man, is she still going to be restricted afterwards?
Okay, this particular passage was introduced in the Torah in connection of the subject which is called Moitzi Shemra. Moitzi Shemra is a case where an individual marries a Na'aro, is an adult lady, and he claims that she breached the trust between him and her by having forbidden relationship after the engagement before the marriage. So in such a case, the Torah displays the entire scenario. Each and every word that appears in a text of the Torah, though it comes in a connection of displaying a scenario, it basically teaches us a set of ruling. So since the Torah have chosen to express the argument that the father of the bride presents in front of the Bedin in such particular way, so the way itself that the Torah presents comes to teach us the principle of Hapeshe Osar hu Hapeshe Hitor. So it's there is talking about clashing statements of different sources. There is a very interesting ruling that each and every case must be judged, although seemingly it is a similar case, but as it always says, God lays in the details. You know, if we, for example, there is a case where one witness comes and tells that this lady is married and was not divorced. The other aide, the other party, he says that she has been divorced. She's quiet. So it's an argument between one witness to the other witness. The ruling is that both of those witnesses, though they may have an argument whether she's been divorced or not, but they have one consensus. They both have defined her as a Eishes Ish, as a married woman. So they both agree that she was married. So therefore, I will accept her as a married woman, and therefore, if she went ahead and married with someone else, I will force them to be separated because there is a clear evidence that she is married. Then there is the next scenario. A lady and two males appear. Now, one male claims that this is my wife and the other gentleman is my slave. The other gentleman said exactly the opposite. She is my wife and the other gentleman is my slave. And the wife said, I am the master of those two gentlemen. They are both my slaves. In such a case, I may think that both of them, seemingly, though each and every one of them claims that she is his wife, but seemingly both of them are claiming that she is a married woman. Nevertheless, I don't believe them. I will assume that she is not married. Reason? Because they are biased. In the first case, where there is one witness against another witness, and one of them says she is divorced and the other one said she is not, they are testifying, they have a consensus, but without any bias, because they are testifying on a third party. In the case of the two gentlemen, that each and every one claims that the other person is my slave, but she is my wife, their testimony about her status of being married is a biased testimony. When there is a bias, they're not reliable. So it's very important to make a distinction and to pay attention to the details. I'm just giving the principles of at what point reliability, bias, pre-existing knowledge, or introductory knowledge will make and break the entire decision that Beis Din will make to each and every particular case. There is, until now we spoke about when a lady or another party testifying whether the lady is not anymore in a status of marriage due to a divorce. But when it comes to death, it is much more laxing as far as assigning credibility to her statement. When a lady comes and she says, I was married, or I know that she was married, and she comes and says, my husband died, I will assign credibility. Reason? Because no one in her right mind gonna go and provide a false statement in something that eventually gonna be discovered that it's not so, and he comes and she will damage her children and will make them for mamzerim for life. So for that reason, when it comes to a testimony about the death of the husband, there is much more credibility is being assigned. But there is always exceptions. And those exceptions are those 5 ladies who cannot stand each other, who will never going to be reliable. Mentioned them yesterday: a mother-in-law, a sister-in-law, a stepdaughter, a tzoro. A tzoro is one lady who is with the other lady. So here is the interesting ruling. A man who is married to 2 wives. And one wife comes and she says, my husband died. So she is allowed to get married. But her other tzoro, the other wife, cannot get married based on the testimony of the other tzoro, because a tzoro is not a source that is reliable to provide testimony. So very interesting that again over here I will make a distinction between a typical testimony and a testimony of a tzoro. I will conclude with a good vote. We spoke yesterday about when a person divorces a wife, even the altar are producing tears. And the question that is being asked, why the altar? Amongst the vessels in the temple would make much more sense for the menorah, for the candelabra, to produce tears. It will make sense to the Holy Ark, where Luchoi Sabris, where the tablets of covenant are there. But a Mizbeach, he is the most desensitized item in the temple. Because what the Mizbeach sees the whole day? Blood, slaughtering, burning, fire. Since when a Mizbeach is so sensitive for a divorce that takes place? And one of the answers that were given, that the Mizbeach, it's true, as far as sensitivity, this is not the strength, but the Mizbeach can value how far, when there is a proper sacrifice is being made, how far can a person get when a little sacrifice is being done? How many marriages, how many bonds would have been preventing any form of divorce, pain and agony, had they sacrificed a little bit of themselves? And for that reason, the Mizbeach, out of all the utensils, of all the vessels in the temple, he is the one who comes.
Wow.
Thank you.